Hello and welcome, and I hope you're enjoying your Radio Days Europe in Malmö. And you are lucky. You are lucky because this session is designed like a very well-equipped high-end car. It is conceived as an all-in-one panel. You have the luck to benefit from the inputs and the expertise from all the players of the connected car game today. First, Roger Langtot from Strategy Analytics will set the scene and share with you all the things you need to know to understand the market, its evolution, the usage of today and tomorrow. It will help you to build your strategy when it comes to deliver a great radio and audio experience in the connected car. Then Tomas Grynrd from the Swedish Radio, Joe D'Angelo from Xperi, and Hans Bleckert from the Swedish car maker Polestar will discuss all the challenges they have in common to imagine the future of radio and audio in the car. We will speak about metadata, connectivity, access to live and on-demand content. We will speak about competition with the third-party platforms, innovation, fragmentation of the offer, hybrid radio, and all the topics you might want to bring to this conversation. This session is meant to be the most interactive possible, so don't be shy, don't be afraid to raise your hand. You will have the luck to have all the players on stage. This is maybe a unique opportunity for you to define what will be important for your industry to build in the car. So Thomas will be a kind of your spokesperson today for the radio industry, and no doubt that he will challenge and be challenged by Joe, Hans, and Roger, our industry experts. So Thomas,
okay, thanks.
The floor is yours.
Thank you very much.
You're the spokesperson.
Yes. Great, thanks so much, and great to see you. The room is practically full. Super. Well, my name is Thomas. I work at Swedish Radio with digital partnerships, and I try to keep focus on everything that is around the connected car. I would like to start with a very quick survey just to understand the temperature of the room. So, hands up if you've ever been in a car. Looks like we have a kind of an expert group. Okay, hands up if you think the car is crucial for the radio in the future. So we have a room full of broadcasters who work with radio that have been in a car and think that the car is crucial for the radio. Answer this question then. Why do we look like crap in the car? For real, we really do look like crap. We look like something from 1983 in most of the cars. So why is that? Why is it because it's doesn't matter? Perhaps the technology is perfect. We don't need any pictures and things like that. The technology is perfect, or perhaps it's because it's super hard. It's so many contact points, so many different operating systems, so many different brands, so it's very hard to kind of feel that you have any responsibility as a broadcaster. Or is it perhaps that we are masochists and we really want to try to deliberately kill radio, but it doesn't matter what we do and how lousy we're visualized, we kind of like a cockroach will return and return. Something is it, and I think that we need to take much more responsibility around the visuals and how we are presented in the car. But this session will not be only about the visual. As Mathieu said, there's so much going on in this area. There is so much around the connected cars, there's so much around Android Automotive, and there is so much happening right now in the connected cars. So I'm really thrilled to speak about this with these gentlemen. And first out is Roger Langtot to kind of set the scene of where we are. So please.
So there must be a better analogy than to compare the radio in the car to a cockroach. I'd like to regard it as a best-kept secret because sometimes you can't even find the radio in the car today. And that is a concern. In fact, just recently, so I just took delivery of a model year 2022 BMW X3, And I went from CarPlay, and I was trying to get back to the radio. You have to hit the little logo, as many of you already know. And I had the radio, and I could see a little fever graph showing that the radio was playing, but I couldn't hear the radio. I thought, oh, great. I can't hear the radio, but I can see it in my car. Somehow or other, this problem resolved itself, but for a moment, I was having an existential crisis on behalf of the industry. I now, on a regular basis, can find the radio in my BMW. Be assured, all is well. So, what are we going to talk about? So I'm going to talk about the state of automotive displays and systems in the car, state of automotive connectivity. So I'm going to talk about the vehicle architecture for a minute. I'm going to give you a little bit of a whistle-stop tour because I have way too many slides for the allotted time. So I'm going to go through these quickly. I'm pretty sure these slides will be available to all of you via the organization website, the event website, or if you want to be sure to get it, just give me your card and I'll get it to you, because those of you who know me, I'm a card hound, and it's my little secret way of getting more cards and connecting with more people in this space. So what is happening in the car? So I hate this analogy of the car as a smartphone on wheels, but that is what is kind of happening. So we're talking to our clients every day, and they're asking us questions about this phenomenon of the car moving to a centralized architecture with a single processor that's managing everything in the vehicle, and one of the manifestations of that is a cockpit domain controller, which you don't need to know a lot about, but what it means is a single processor controlling the instrument cluster and the display, and that's a lot of what is behind these huge pillar-to-pillar displays that you're seeing in cars, this new EE architecture in the vehicle. It also is driven by the shift in the industry towards electric vehicles, where they're designing new EVs, and so car companies are starting from scratch, and they're saying, hey, wait a minute, we want to reduce the number of networks in the car, the number of processors, the number of modules, the amount of content. We want a central processor. We want to rethink the whole story that we're telling. And, of course, we're going to bring in a bigger display, so that the whole vision of what a connected car is changing before our eyes, as is how the information is being rendered on the screen. And of course, the radio dial is long gone. That's down the road in the rearview mirror. So what is the radio going to be? What is it going to look like? These are the issues we're wrestling with every day at Strategy Analytics to help our clients understand this. And we look at it at the automotive industry at everything from the semiconductor layer through to the cloud and all the applications and hardware that go in between. And we also have a user experience team that's doing surveys and customer clinics and focus groups in China, North America, and Europe. So we're looking at how this experience is evolving across all of these geographies and across all of these applications, because radio is just one application in the car. In the connected car, you basically have communications, navigation, and content. And so radio is like 1/3 of the story, although the radio can be on, of course, at all times. So there's going to be in this presentation, a lot of data like this. Again, you don't have to take pictures of it. The presentation will be available either directly from me or from the event organizer. And so I have a lot of slides like this showing you how the displays are evolving in the car. And the irony is a lot of car companies probably have told a lot of broadcasters or app developers, hey, you can't distract the driver. Well, I don't know about you, but this stuff looks pretty distracting to me. And increasingly so, although every one of these automobile manufacturers will tell you the lengths to which they've gone to reduce the glance time in the car. And I guarantee you that all of these solutions that are coming to market have come to market with mitigating distraction in mind. Nevertheless, there's a lot going on in that center display. And when I was driving and struggling to find my radio, I guarantee you I was quite distracted trying to find the real radio in my car. But you can see we're going pillar to pillar, although this is more of a phenomenon in China. But a further note on that is the fact that car companies are looking to implement OLED displays, which could then be all shapes and sizes and not strictly flat and conforming, to sort of a notebook computer kind of form factor. The only problem is prices have gone up on displays, and so it's been somewhat limited how creative they can actually get. But bigger and more is the underlying story. And let me just further note about my glorious BMW Model Year 22 delivery experience with the X3. When I got home, I realized that this chip shortage is a bit of a problem. I didn't have an HD radio and Sirius XM chipset in my car. One of the reasons why I bought the car was to have the latest content management system in my vehicle, and I'm assured that I'll it'll come to me at some later date. I'm not holding my breath. But so the chip shortage is an issue actually for the industry, including for some of these displays. Some of these displays have been deleted in some cars, and some cars are awaiting delivery because they're waiting for those displays or those chips, including chips that impact our industry. Again, this is kind of a state of the art. This is like one of the most advanced systems in the market, and yet there are some distracting elements in there. But what you have is everything is unmoored and across a much bigger piece of real estate, and so there's no consistency. It's a different experience in every vehicle, and so what we look to actually is standards and elements that are common and that we can understand and find in every vehicle. So there's some sort of predictability, if you will. That's what we're looking for: scalable solutions. And well, Polestar is maybe partially an offender in some areas. So some things we find they do very well, some things less well. Generally positive, I will say. Here's Volvo. There's some good things and some bad things, but generally speaking, what you're seeing here is a lot of creative effort to render content in the vehicle in a non-distracting fashion and to enhance the driving experience. And content management is the consistent element across it. I mean, you may be making occasional phone calls, you may be occasionally using navigation, but you're probably always listening to something in the car. And then finally, the Ford Mach-E. This did not get really high ratings, but first generation, a couple things are positive. But again, it looks kind of distracting. And there are some more details from our user experience team. I'm not going to get into that, but I just wanted to share it with you as part of this. And then, of course, as you've heard in some other presentations and commentary here, video is coming into the car, I would argue, primarily in the rear seat. However, if you're charging your Tesla now, you can watch Netflix while it's charging. So you're not watching Netflix while you're driving at speed on the highway. Perhaps autonomous vehicles, people will want to watch video. Perhaps they won't, actually. It remains to be seen. But we are getting video delivered into cars increasingly because every car you buy in China, North America, and Europe has a wireless connection, okay? So streaming is a thing in all cars now, at least for some sort of free period, after which you have to determine whether you're going to pay the subscription to the connected car proposition. So what do we need to know? So what is the state of connectivity? I'm saying it's universal in cars, although the automotive industry has not defined a value proposition yet that guarantees people will pay for that connectivity. There's a battle over the user experience and interfaces. We're still wrestling with the impact of Google, Android, and Amazon. What is the emerging role for digital assistants in the car? So we're accessing and managing content with voice. And what are the challenges that are associated with that? We're still ironing that out. Radio DNS just updated some of their standards to address that issue. Driver monitoring. So you have a facial recognition app, usually on your phone if you have a new phone. That's coming into your car. Now, some people may regard that as intrusive or almost paranoia-inducing, but the idea of being able to get in your car and be recognized immediately with all of your content preferences, et cetera, maybe that's a positive that we come to accept and enjoy, but it is coming. It is a mandated reality for Europe. And audience measurement on steroids. So think of that, measuring an audience that's seat-belted into a vehicle listening to this content and identified by a driver monitoring system and maybe, or just by behavioral characteristics. Wow, that's an incredible audience measurement engine. Why haven't we figured this out yet? Coming soon. And ultimately, my takeaway message is that your car is a browser with all that implies. So all cars are being connected all over. You can't buy a car that doesn't have a connection, so just bear that in mind. It's just a given. I'm not going to dwell on it, but you'll have that data. It is changing with 5G, so it has a safety implication, which means there are going to be an increasing number of mandates requiring that connection be alive. So for example, one silly little application is the intelligent speed assistant, which is the speed limit icon that's in your instrument cluster. That requires a vehicle connection because according to European standards, beginning next year, every car must render the speed limit on the given road segment you're driving on at 90% level of accuracy, which requires a whole machine learning backend, which requires a connection to be live to the vehicle. So as you can imagine, your automaker, well, I can't charge for the intelligent speed assistant icon in the instrument cluster. Is there something I can charge for? Maybe content management or enabling a platform that there is maybe even, or an e-commerce element. But the industry hasn't quite figured this out yet, okay? So it is still at this crossroads, but 5G is changing the conversation because automakers have had to recognize that can't just put the cheapest module in the car anymore. Can't just put a 2G or a 3G. Those networks are gone. You got to put 5G in the car because it's going to be on the road for 10 or 15 years. So what are we going to do with that high bandwidth connection to the car? Well, streaming audio is a good candidate for that. And so, in addition, cars are going to be increasingly contextually aware of their surroundings, both for safety as well as for non-safety applications. Again, cars are getting more safety-focused, more sensors, and so they are more contextually aware. And so that has implications, again, for radio as well. And so what has entered the picture is the hybrid radio conversation. So every application in the car is now connected if you're an automaker. It's enough to make your brain explode if you're an automotive engineer, because the navigation system needs to be connected. If you're going to be competitive with Google Maps, you're going to have a connected system so the maps are updated, you have good routing, you have good traffic information. Consumers want a voice assistant in the car. Voice as an interface is a much less distracting way of interacting with vehicle systems, so voice assistants, to really work properly, probably are going to need a connection. And guess what? Even the terrestrial broadcast radio really needs a connection in order to render the metadata in the vehicle accurately, because that information changes. It's changing every day, every week. And not only that, there's metadata associated with the advertising, which we don't really talk about enough, but that too needs to be synchronized, that there's a visual element that's synchronized with whatever the audio element is. And there's an interactive element as well, potentially, with a voice interface. Let's not be touching screens for that particular application. But this is the world of hybrid radio. And because we want to also have access to the streaming content, because these two are melding, they're coming together, and we want access in the same content management tool to podcast material, because broadcasters have podcasts as well, and other kinds of content. So we want an integrated, connected platform in the car, but you need that connection anyway for the basic metadata rendering. You can't do it, as some car makers are trying to still to this day, with a fixed piece of metadata for all the broadcasters, because it's dynamic data. It's changing all the time. You even need, if you have a semi-autonomous driving system, you need a connection to get the GNS correction data. So cars need to be connected at all times. The only problem here is automakers really haven't puzzled out the business model. Only Tesla has basically said, okay, $10 a month, and that covers everything. Software updates, you can even stream over the connection, because I guess the assumption is you're not going to be doing it that frequently, and they don't have a whole app store experience, et cetera. There's a variety of players that are playing it in different ways in this market, and it reflects the fragmentation that we're seeing. Streaming implies fragmentation, as do integrating podcasts. So it's no surprise that consumers in the vehicle, and I have data in an upcoming slide to show how radio is down a bit, okay, and streaming is up, but more broadly speaking it's more fragmented. People are sampling from a variety of sources of content in the car, which we need to pay closer attention to, which also the audience measurement bit is going to come into play. But organizations like Radioline are playing here. I'm not going to go into details. Radio Player is exhibiting here. If you have any questions about how they're approaching the market, you can speak with them. Xperia is on this panel, obviously a global platform. I'll let Joe talk in detail about what he's doing. AudioBurst, an Israeli startup with, again, an app-based kind of a solution. And so just a final word about the app proposition. So if you're a broadcaster, you're probably thinking, isn't there one aggregation platform I can get on that has all of the broadcasters and take that app-based approach? And I will say this, I'm not sort of anti-app, but it is a fraught proposition. So do you want to have your own app? Maybe you do. Do you want to be on an aggregation platform? Maybe you want to be on an aggregation platform. But the key is there is no single aggregation platform that has all the stations on it. So even in the US, we have iHeart, Odyssey, and TuneIn, okay? And does that cover all of them? Maybe. I'm not even sure if it covers all of them. But the point is, it's fragmented. And then some car companies are planning to have app stores in the car, which is no solution in and of itself, because if you're in the app store, you've got to tell people to go to the app store to find your app and get them to use it. Whereas other automakers say, we're not going to have an app store. CarPlay and Android Auto are our app stores. That's as far as we want to go down the app store path. And then the other question is, well, maybe you want to be part of some kind of embedded solution, built in, so you don't have to be separately downloaded. That's probably going to be something more like Xperi, okay, or maybe Radio Player, something along that line. So it's a fraught decision whether you go down the app path. These are the digital assistant partnerships in the automotive industry. Here are some of the details about driver monitoring, which has a lot of broad implications about safety, and it is going to be a mandated solution. Here is some data, it's a little bit old, from Drive Time Metrics. So they were trying to build a solution for audience measurement across brands. And then a couple of the auto brands that they were working with that were sharing data that was allowing them to build these analytics said, oh, you know what? Which automakers do this all the time. It's quite frustrating. We can do this in-house ourselves. We don't need you. But that's completely absurd because nobody's interested in what GM customers are listening to. They want to know what everybody's listening to in the car. So unfortunately, the decision by individual car makers to sort of pull out of this conversation has set back the audience measurement proposition a little bit. But there may be more we have to hear about this tomorrow, about what's happening there. Because once you're connected to things, then you're collecting data. And once you have data, you have measurement. And that's the crossroads we're at today. And that will be transformative when we can understand what people are actually doing in the car. So I have those data samples. The bottom line is the car is a browser with all that implies. Google built a $100 billion business around all of your and my search on phones and TVs and computers. Well, the one blank spot they have and why they're so interested in getting in the car because it's a big black hole in their data. They have no idea what we're searching for in the car. And so they want to get in there. Automakers, about this time last year or 2 years ago, automakers were looking to jump all in on this proposition. It seemed like a good idea. But there's a big rethink going on in the industry. The auto industry may be saying, you know what, we like your operating system, Android, but maybe not the automotive services, maybe not the search. But if we can get that data out of the car, then we can get to customer intent and ultimately attribution. When someone hears a proposition and then acts on it in their vehicle, amazing. Attribution, holy cow, that would be a game changer. So that's what's in the offing. I do have some data on the adoption of Android in the car. That's here. Notably, mass market brands adopting Android. It's coming on very fast in the industry. Some of these automakers are also adopting Google Automotive Services. One of them may be on this panel. Others are taking a second thought about that. Here's some data on the shift to streaming and away from radio. And then some thoughts about that. And then, since you're standing up, I'm not going to go into this slide.
No, you shouldn't.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks. Whew. Well, super clear. Thanks a lot. Anyone confused? I am. I've been working with this for like 7 years. I'm still super confused in this area. But that's why it's so fascinating. We will try to drill into some of these questions during this panel. But now Joe has a couple of pictures. A couple of pictures.
Just a couple. Wow. Okay. Wow, we're here in person. This is fantastic. I'm imagining most of you in the room have no idea who Xperi is. So I'm going to just introduce us real quickly. We're a US-based company with a massive presence in Europe. About 450 people on our team work in Europe. And we represent a lot of very well-known brands that are dedicated to building immersive experience around entertainment. Radio, audio, video. DTS, you know them for surround sound, HD radio, which is the US or North American terrestrial digital radio standard. TiVo, which we just merged with 2 years ago. So TiVo and all of their great IP and metadata are now part of the Xperi family. All In Media, who do apps and studio systems. And then IMAX Enhanced, where we have actually partnered with IMAX and we're bringing that amazing theatrical experience into the home. But how does that relate to radio? Well, we actually have an unbelievable radio and automotive business. We have about a 22-year relationship working with the broadcast industry as well as the automotive industry, bringing new technologies around radio into the car. We've deployed our technologies in over 100 million vehicles around the world with every major car brand and every major supplier. And we do this in a very deliberate way. We work collectively with them to build and design radios that are going to meet the expectations of not only the user, but also the broadcaster. And so you see the 4,500 radio designs that have been certified. Every radio that goes into market with our technology gets certified for operations and compliance with whatever the technology offering is. And this is very critical as you look to the world of hybrid radio and the fragmented nature of broadcast. So as I mentioned, we have the HD radio system in North America, but we have also launched the only global hybrid radio system called DTS AutoStage. This is live in 68 countries, represents over 80,000 radio stations, and can now be found in Mercedes vehicles. And I'm going to give you some context about why I believe this platform is critical to the industry. So right now we're in this world of transition where we've got embedded services like radio, like navigation, things that come with your car in the dashboard. We also have CarPlay and Android for Auto, where you're now able to tether your device and bring in all the applications that you use on a daily basis on your phone. But there's a line of demarcation between those two worlds, the embedded versus the tethered. That line is disappearing. We're now seeing, primarily because of Android Automotive, we're seeing a platform in the car that works much like a phone and allows you to install apps that become embedded. And they're going to be right there next to radio, and they're broad stores that are being launched. So as Roger said, it's not only Google Automotive Services, but you have others that are bringing apps into the vehicle. One of the challenges with Android Automotive is it's an open source platform, and their initial release of the radio functionality did not meet the expectations or requirements, I would say, of everyone in this room. And that goes for analog radio, how they dealt with RDS. It certainly deals with DAB and HD radio as well. If you use AOSP, the open source, all the functions that make digital radio fantastic, a lot of them were not available in that platform. So you have a platform challenge. You also have a services challenge. Given this transition to the embedded environment in the car, you have, and I'm sure you're all aware of these big 12 global service providers that are largely available anywhere in the world, have close to 1 billion registered users, and collectively generate almost $42 billion in audio services revenue. So when I talk about Apple in that list, it's just the music service. Obviously, they generate a lot more than that. And this is an important number to know because this represents 97% of all the radio revenue generated from all public service and all commercial radio stations around the world. So when you think collectively as an industry, what kind of resources do we have available to us to compete against these players? This is what you're up against on a relative basis. There's also a real challenge presented by these digital players. Not only are they extremely well-funded, but they've got a massively loyal user community that loves the product. And they love it because it's consistent, it's on demand, it's reliable, it's global, and those same kind of attributes apply to the car companies. Car companies are doing this, are integrating these technologies, number one, primarily because of the consumer demand for them, but number two, they're also relatively easy, low-risk services to implement because they work everywhere. This is not something that the car company needs to manage or worry about. And these platforms can continuously evolve. If Spotify wants to put out a new feature, They work on it behind the scenes. When they're ready, they push it out to the car, to the phone, and it just works, and the user gets a new user experience. And then for the commercial broadcasters in this space, I'm sure you're all dealing with the attribution that Roger talked about. You're seeing the value that you can deliver to advertisers on your digital platforms. All of that is coming into the car with these digital providers as well. And so you as broadcasters need to think, how are we going to migrate from a broadcast-only world to a hybrid digital world? And, not to reiterate everything Roger said, but, the app strategy is certainly something that you should embrace. You should all have an app. But the question is that enough? Because all those players live in this app space. And now you're going to have this overwhelming choice. How many apps are the users actually going to download to their vehicle and use on a daily basis? And I just highlighted, 8 of the major ones. And they're right there. They'll be right next to your app. And how do you drive engagement? How do you drive discovery? I believe the answer is hybrid radio. I believe one of the most viable solutions, platforms, is DTS AutoStage. Here you see DTS AutoStage implemented in a Mercedes vehicle in the MBUX system, highlighting an SWR station. And what you see is a consistent presentation of all the radio stations that are available to that driver in that market. Every radio station is represented with rich graphics, and in addition, now playing information. So to me, those metadata elements are table stakes. If you don't have clearly identifiable metadata around your station and programming, you're already behind. The exciting thing is, where do we go from there once we have this implemented? And AutoStage is unique because it's free to broadcasters. There's no charge for broadcasters to be part of this platform. It's a hybrid radio platform that delivers the best of broadcast with IP enhancements. And we deliver analytics back to the broadcasters at no charge. And we'll talk about that a little bit more tomorrow. So a little preview. Tomorrow, my colleague Garyon and I are going to have a chat with Matt Deegan and go into this platform in much more detail so you can understand what one of these solutions in the hybrid radio space looks like and what you should expect from these platforms in return for the trust to deliver your data into this kind of connected environment. So I think we're going to transition to Q&A now, but hopefully that sets the stage for you.
Thanks so much. Great. We will talk a bit about hybrid radio. There are a lot of different hybrid radio solution providers, but I would like to kind of understand the hybrid radio a bit more later on. As Mathieu said, we would like to have this like an interactive session. So if you have a question, whenever, raise your hand and we will try to pick them up. Does anyone have a question right now? Okay. I'll keep track of the audience if you have any type of question. But first, I started by mentioning that I think that radio really looks crappy in many cars. One of the cars that radio really looks crappy is in a Polestar. Hans, why?
Thank you, Thomas. Yeah, I think that's a good question. I mean, we are determined to try to change the society, right? So we are on a trip. We are a 2-year-old brand trying to do whatever we can to change things. And the area I am responsible for, the connected car, is really the most interesting one. We out-delivered on Tesla, I guess. We are offering all our customers free internet. So the car is truly connected. The user don't need to be hassled by buying any data plans or whatever. And that also gives us great opportunities. So, I mean, we wanted to change how we interact with the car.
Did you kind of forget the radio in a way?
And that's a good thing, because that is not really part. We came from the very core things of a car. We started with navigation. We started with the voice system. Maybe we overlooked the analog radio. I can truly say it's not the most beautiful app in the car.
But what are you doing with it not right now? Are you kind of planning to do anything about it?
Yeah, so today we have basically developed that ourselves. As you have been talking about here. So, I mean, we are soon introducing the next line of vehicles, and then we will give this a bit of more love.
Perfect. But I mean, it's just not, of course, Polestar. There's a lot of cars. We did, at Swedish Radio, we did a survey, so we kind of sat down in every existing car that is being sold right now and looking at the dashboard. And it's immensely bad in many of the cars, actually, and even the new ones. Does anyone have a clue why it's so often poor and very different? And don't say that they should buy Xperia.
No. I mean, no, because that actually won't solve the HMI issue for you. Even with our platform, OEMs have the freedom to design the user experience as they see fit. So I think it's an evolution of technology, and it's also a priority. I think, unfortunately, when Google introduced Android Automotive, it does a ton of things. It supports a ton of features. Radio is just one. And quite honestly, radio was not the most important feature that they wanted to fully implement. And we've taken steps with the industry and with the NAB and others to point and help them update AOSP to make it more feature-rich so that Tier 1s and OEMs can use that operating system and create a better radio. I think the other dynamic we have here is radio's been evolving pretty quickly. I mean, if you think of the history of radio, we were stuck with analog and RDS for years, and that's all the car companies had to deal with. Now you've got HD radio with synchronized visuals and text. You've got DAB with the same suite, and there isn't a lot of structure. The World DAB organization has done a great job with their MBU, with their guidelines to try to guide the industry, but there aren't kind of mandates around it. So there's a bit of a learning curve, I think, and we've certainly seen this with HD radio, where the first generation radios may have all the features, but it's not really intuitive. It's not very easy to use. And over time, they get better and better and better. So I think choice, flexibility, and technology innovation have been a challenge. And I think the world of hybrid radio is going to make that exponentially more risky. With innovation comes risk. And the question is, how do you mitigate that risk while still embracing the innovation?
Yeah.
But I think also, if I can add, I mean, we are, as a car maker, we are doing the complete car, and our expertise might be in drivelines and getting an efficient car. We might not be the most suited app developer in the world. So that's why we open it up for an ecosystem where there is loads of app developers who are really skilled in this and can bring the content to the car through a Play Store. They can update the app whenever they want. They can put whatever features they would like to have in that app. So, I mean, I'm a bit, hey guys, we've given you the opportunity now. Why are you not putting content in my car? So, I mean, I can put the challenge back to you guys and do an amazing job on the apps instead.
Yeah, sure, but the radio button, that's your job.
Sure, and maybe I should take that back, and let's try to do that in you know, you can download that through Play Store as well if we get the support in the Android platform for that.
But it's amazing the fact that, I mean, if you sit down in the car and you actually are presented the right logo for your channel, and then you kind of start feeling vertigo, you also have like an album cover. And this is 2022. That's basics, of course. And you have so much cool stuff that you can do, but that is like, really cool. So Roger, do you think that the car manufacturers don't see the opportunity of radio? Let's say it like this. Is the car buyer interested in radio when he buys or she buys a car?
So in our surveys, I don't have it in the presentation here, but I've shown it in the past. Actually, one of the slides does show it's a must-have features in the car. Radio still is right at the top as a must-have if you actually ask people. But the advocacy for radio is weak, okay? The only way to find out that strong demand exists would be to take it away, and then there would be an outcry. And it actually is a difficult solution to bring into the car because of all the reception issues, which are all reset with having to integrate digital now. And then you look at what the big exciting new introduction to the car was over the past 10 years. It was Apple CarPlay and Android Auto projection from the smartphone. Apple refused to allow the FM chip integration and was difficult as a partner for the broadcast industry. And Android Auto as a projection solution, didn't have radio at all, until the NAB sort of stepped in and tried to bring them to the table to try to mitigate some of the shortcomings of that solution. As Joe noted, they have not all been overcome. So they sort of soaked up a lot of the available bandwidth to have this conversation about what radio was to become. So the two big leading, Google and Apple, they really weren't that interested in solving the real problem or taking advantage, of these new capabilities. So it was left to the likes of Mercedes-Benz, for example, or Audi, for that matter, to see how creative we could become with this new experience. And so it's that lack of advocacy, basically, for the industry.
It's amazing that this room, that we aren't more upset about this, right? As an industry, we should be really upset. We have a question.
Hi, I'm Simon from a Danish national broadcasting company. I was just wondering, we talk a lot about, or you guys talk a lot about the visuals in the car, but I think radio, first and foremost, is audio related. And I was just wondering whether you guys, because when I use my smartphone at home, and if I just put on a movie or turn on my PlayStation, the TV will itself adjust both audio settings and the visual settings to the right things for what I'm doing right now at the moment. Are there any way, because a lot of live radio have, the car as an listening experience is pretty rough sometimes because you're driving around, maybe you don't have the most expensive car with audio isolation and all that stuff. Is there also consideration about how the audio is presented in the newer cars?
I'm not sure exactly what you mean by that, but what is emerging is the ability to have an interaction and get access more easily through the support of voice assistants in the car to find what you want, or even to have information nominated to you on the screen that's relevant or next to or fits your preferences, that's available from another source potentially, but in a non-distracting fashion. Are you talking about the quality of the audio?
Or is it like 3D sound or stuff like that?
Yeah, exactly. I'm talking like also the way the sound in the car is made. You talk about IMAX experience, for example. I was wondering, what about like the sound experience?
Yeah, but let's ask Hans from Polestar. Is that like a more non-straightforward distribution of the audio, like 3D sounds and stuff like that? Is that something, or the quality of the speakers, is that something that you kind of discuss?
Yeah, we are discussing that, and I mean, audio is important in a car. I mean, two reasons. One, it's hard environment. It's road noise and everything, so you need to be careful in how you do your audio things. But also, I mean, it's different people and different mindsets. So we are looking into having, presets of things that you can be in a studio somewhere maybe, or doing your specific really heavy bass thing, or you can do radio, because those three are really different in how the sound is.
Yeah. So any cool stuff that you're kind of presenting soon?
I will be quiet for today.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me comment on that, because we are definitely working in that space. You heard about facial recognition software coming into the car. We actually have a solution that does both DMS, driver monitoring, and occupancy monitoring. And we're using that knowledge of where passengers are seated, how many are in the car, as well as our DTS post-processing, the audio system, to provide the right audio experience based on the number of occupants and the speaker array in the vehicle.
Or even different audio for different people in different positions in the car, zonal audio.
Super. Question?
Yeah, I am from Swedish Radio. Also, I had a short question. So now you're talking a lot about these kind of integrated systems, but is there a future for just connecting your phone to the car? How do you see that in the future? Because people are very familiar with how their phone works, and
that's where we're at today. It's primarily with CarPlay and Android Auto, but some people, like in a Tesla, you can't. You're going to just be connecting your phone and streaming whatever it is on your phone. The whole issue is, don't touch your phone, don't look at your phone, but, I'm not going to ask for a raising of hands, but I suspect I'm not the only one that's occasionally touching my phone in the car. We're not supposed to be doing that, and that's what Android Auto and CarPlay actually do. Other people don't want to use those apps because they want to control it.
Yeah.
So,
and CarPlay and Android for Auto are not free to the car manufacturer. They have to pay to integrate that. And if you've ever used it in multiple vehicles, they all look the same. So they commoditize the dash and take away the creative design experience of the car companies. So there's actually a motivation by the car industry to find solutions that allow them to maintain their creative control over the user experience.
But is it well used? It depends on what you say, but
based on your opening remarks, I'd say you think it's not well used. But again, they're not just looking at radio, right? They're doing climate control, they're doing navigation. There's all these features that are now being controlled in the center stack. Radio is just one of them. So, I do think we have to raise the profile of everything that radio is doing to make radio relevant in the digital age, DAB, HD radio, hybrid radio, and work with the car companies to understand what they can do with it. Because there's a massive opportunity that we've made it very easy for car companies to do this, believe it or not. Radio Player, ourselves, we work very closely with the car companies to get it right, and then work with the broadcasters. This is your responsibility. If the car companies implement a capability to display data, the industry needs to make that data available. The last thing these car companies want is a blank screen or a feature that looks like it's not working, and someone drive back to the dealership and say, my radio's broken. So
yeah,
and
that's perfect. Sorry.
My vision to your question is that you will not need to have the phone in the car. That's how I see it. We need to bring the experience into the built-in system. Maybe that's natural because we chose an Android now, but we need to give that experience to the user using the native system. I mean, and also if you're looking forward, you can use your phone as a key today already, but I mean, that could also emerge. You can step into the car, get, identify that's you, and all the apps that you need are in the car already, so you don't need to fiddle with your phone because there are laws and they are there for a reason. We crash when we use the phone in the car, so we shouldn't do that.
I will. There is a question over there, but at first we have to sort this out with hybrid radio. It's kind of the buzzword that nobody really understands, but everybody kind of understands it. Joe, please explain to a 5-year-old what is it?
Sure.
Is it like a UI or is it metadata or what is it?
I mean, hybrid radio in its simplest concept is just the combination of broadcast-delivered audio and some data with IP-delivered data that enriches or enhances that audio experience. It's designed to help, first and foremost, with discovery. With the proliferation of choice with DAB and HD radio, there's so much more content out there. You could never imagine sitting there through a dial incrementing, right? You need a structured way to present data or present programming information. And then once you connect with that audio that you want to listen to, how can you enhance that with additional metadata delivered over the IP channel? And most importantly, how can you interact with that data and measure that experience? So,
well, and I do, the big thing for me ever since digital radio came on the scene is that radio becomes searchable. Radio is searchable?
Yeah.
I mean, think about that, the discoverability of something that's available on another station that maybe the listeners never listened to that station before, but they discover it through search. Search for radio, this is, to me, the fundamental revolution. But in order to enable that sort of Internet of Radio experience in the car, you need to have all that metadata infrastructure so you can have that searchability. So that's the story. And not every automaker is on the same evolutionary path of coming to grips with this and recognizing this opportunity, because many of them are just stuck in the weeds of digital reception and what's the quality, do we have interference with EVs and the whole complicating factors of rendering radio in the car, as opposed to the excitement of creating a new user engagement and a new experience. And I did want to emphasize that we are finally getting some advocacy from NAB and World DAB to bring the industry to the table. So that is actually happening.
But if it's kind of important, and it makes the car manufacturers or the OEMs lives easier with a hybrid solution. How come that you and, let's say, Radio Player only have kind of made a few agreements with car manufacturers? You have Mercedes, Radio Player have 2 or 3, I don't know. Why isn't, and you have been around for a couple of years, why isn't it more? Why isn't 10, 15?
Yeah, well, it takes time. Number one, the car companies, the design cycles are long, and as our CEO discussed, I didn't disclose this, we're engaged with 16 car manufacturers right now in varying degrees of evaluation and assessment. And just like, you know, broadcasters are challenged to make investment decisions and technology decisions, so are car companies. You know, they're being thrown a boatload of innovations around driver assistance systems, you know, changing the drivetrain from, you know, gas to batteries. I mean, there's so many demands on the car companies right now to come in and say, oh, I can give you a better radio experience. It takes a lot of convincing to get that up the priority list. The good thing is, because of research that was sponsored by World Dab and others, we are making the importance of radio much more prominent in the minds of automakers. And, you know, I applaud Audi and their leadership to be the first ones to take that step to enhance radio like they've done. They really are leading the industry in showing that it can be done and should be done. It's worth the trip.
Yeah, great. We have a question.
I was just reading between the lines. Sorry, Brian Rowan, System Integrator, Clyde Broadcast. I was reading between the lines of what everybody's been saying, from your opening remarks right through everybody, and it seems to me that actually RF or traditional broadcast is an unwelcome inconvenience. You know, I think Roger said you've got to take it away before anyone's going to act. And I wonder, does the panel see a long-term future for RF in cars, or if we want to get the kind of broadcast features we want to see, do we need to move to actually traditional broadcasters streaming with some form of geolocation, you know, FM, you know, DRM, HD? Is it actually
super interesting? Yeah. Who wants to go?
So I'll say the analogy to cockroaches was inappropriate, okay? But there's a similarly poor analogy, which is comparing it to cybersecurity. Automakers hate cybersecurity, but they've been told you need to have a cybersecurity solution in the vehicles, even though all of us here probably don't think our cars are ever going to be hacked. It doesn't seem like it's a real thing. But cybersecurity doesn't generate revenue. Where am I going to get the money? So for cybersecurity, it's cost avoidance, obviously. But for radio, where's the money? You know, SiriusXM paid the automakers to put their hardware in the vehicles and gave them a cut of the subscriptions. We don't have that business model in the broadcast industry, so that's the challenge. So it's almost like the automakers are doing this out of the goodness of their heart or something to keep the radio in the car. But the irony is that a lot of the advertising to sell cars is taking place on the radio. So it's an integral part of the industry, actually, and deeply embedded in the fabric, to say nothing of you get very important messages over the radio when you're driving a vehicle. But where's the money? That's the problem. Where's the money? That's the challenge.
Yeah, and from our perspective, I think the question is, what's your time horizon? Is it 5 years, 25 years, or 50 years? And I always try to look at this from a pragmatic perspective, looking at the design cycles of the car companies, the fragmentation of content over apps right now, and it's clear that the radio dial cannot be replicated either from a content perspective or from an economics perspective with IP services. So it's incumbent on us right now to do everything we can to convince the automakers to keep that dedicated piece of hardware, the tuner, in the car, and that's why we're trying to leverage it with IP, because they're putting connectivity in the car. And the question is, how can we build services that make the maximum or deliver the maximum value for that expense that the car company has already invested in? The DAB tuner and the connectivity module. We bring these together, we create more value, we create more stickiness for that DAB module if we're delivering better services.
Our data still shows in our surveys in China, North America, and Europe for sure, radio must-have feature at the top, and most used still still ahead of streaming and other sources, but it is declining.
I think that we're going to see the history evolve in China because they have such a disproportionately subsidized cellular infrastructure, and the government is motivated to connect to people. I'll leave it at that. And you're going to see that's over 30% of global car sales are sold in China. So I think you'll get a prediction for what's going to happen in North America and Europe by what comes into China.
Let's talk about Android Automotive for a short moment. Polestar was the first car in the world that was released with Android Automotive, this completely integrated system in the car, and you went for the gas system where you have all the Google stuff in it. You can go for the open source that a lot of car companies do, but you went for gas. The upsides for you, I can imagine. What is the upsides for broadcasters regarding to the implementation of Android Automotive?
Yeah, I think it has to be in the app space then, that we provide the opportunity for you guys to publish your apps and keeping them updated and giving the content. I mean, you can do it localized or personalized, or, I mean, you can innovate in this area very much in your apps. And we've all enabled that in the car. So that's just an evolution of what you're doing in the phones, I guess.
But there is this big conflict because of all the broadcasters, and when you listen to radio in your car, of course you want the whole radio family to be present, like commercial radio and public service radio, and you want to be able to be in that place. But then all the broadcasters, especially public service broadcasters, want you to listen to your stuff on demand on your app. So there's a kind of conflict between this linear radio environment and if you want to listen to on demand, you have to leave this area and go into your app. So you should try to combine these two. Are there any projects combining these two worlds?
Oh, that's a good question. No real projects, but I can foresee you do that in the app. I mean, you could merge those things in whatever app you're distributing, that you can keep the user with the live radio. Now I'm basically talking IP-based radio then, but I mean, you can keep the user experience in the app and then switch to whatever you would like to do and switch content to a pod or to an on-demand thing.
You should be first to do that.
Yeah.
It will be greatly appreciated.
But I think
the business, I would say.
the challenge is similar. We are in the EV market, and the chargers is tremendously fragmented business, and the market needs to help us solve that fragmentation and bring it together. If you want to, like TuneIn have some stations, or I think the business need to come together and find the aggregated.
So it's a content management proposition, and the challenge is reflected in and maybe it would be different if I had that chip with the HD radio and Sirius XM, but what you're left with is a lot of drop-down menus to move from one mode to another, when what we really want is a unified content management platform where you can voice access anything, whether it's at the podcast, so you're listening to the broadcast, and the broadcast says, check out our podcast, and you go, oh, go to the podcast, and then you can just go to the podcast via a voice access, but all integrated together.
Yeah. We only have like 2 minutes or 1 minute left, so I'll ask you, okay, you are now addressing the broadcasters, the broadcaster community. What should the broadcast community do in order to kind of strengthen and keep the position of radio in the car? I'll start with Joe.
So I'd like to encourage you to be very pragmatic in how you choose to deploy your resources. There's a lot you can do, and there's a lot you should not do. So as you look at the opportunities to proactively engage in the future of the dashboard, do it with intent, and come see our session tomorrow.
Hans.
Yeah, and I have to go the app road. I think you have a great opportunity to build your content in an app and provide it to cars. And I mean, we are first out, but there will be many more to come. So I think go the app world and don't make the experience worse than it is in the phone. I see some examples that some radio channels just, put an app in the store because it should be there. You should have good content and be very personal, I think.
Okay. Roger.
Sort out your metadata so you look the same and have present a consistent face and image wherever you're showing up, on a phone, on a TV, in a car. That's your advertising, as well as the content you're projecting, as well as your station identification. Any sort of asynchrony is really disturbing to the customer. I'm experiencing it right now with my stupid My BMW app, where I have an X3 and I open it up and it thinks I still own the Series 3 that I got rid of 3 years ago, and I can't fix it. And it's the stupidest thing, that asynchrony. You should be harmonized across all platforms.
You're really not pleased with your car?
No, no, not at all.
That's because it's the wrong one.
Exactly. Give a warm hand for these guys. Thank you so much.
Just one word. And if you want to, the music. Tomorrow at 10, if you still want to hear about connected cars, there will be a panel in track 3 with Volvo and Audi. Thank you.